Right, along with the teaser trailer for the new set, Compendium of Rathe, we also did get a nice little cohort of cards to go through. So starting off with the cards from the marketing asset, so there were a handful of cards shown on the marketing asset, though interestingly, not all of them have appeared on the other card vault through FABTCG. So we have Fire That Burns Within, Become the Bottle, and a Speed Demon not appearing in the card vault, but for the majority of, well, Fire That Burns Within and Speed Demon, we can make out the card. It's Become the Bottle that's, completely obscured. So Fire That Burns Within, a 1-cost red. When this attacks, you may discard a Phoenix Flame. If you do, draw a card, and this gets +2 power, and it has at least 2 power. I would assume 3 block being a 1-cost, right, with a triggerable effect for its actual, fair value, right? So, yeah, I would assume it does have 3 defense, but still, the effect is pretty nice, right? So even though it is a draconic action, I would say majorly a Fae card. So the idea being there, you can retrieve your Phoenix Flame from your graveyard, and then using this, you can convert it into something maybe a little bit better, right? As a card from deck. So yeah, a 1-for-4 with Go Again that can convert that extra card you get out of the bin to something else. Definitely nice. And then for everyone else, maybe it lines up, but generally speaking, you're not splashing in any of the Phoenix Flame stuff into, Syndra, Fang, or, Dromai, right? So, yeah, Fire That Burns Within is definitely a nice looking card for Fae. Now, Speed Demon, 0-cost red, scrap. We know that from the little bracketed italicized text, right? So it's an additional cost to play this. You may banish an item or equipment from your graveyard. And then it has, if you control a Hyperdriver, this gets +1 power. And when this attacks, if you have scrapped a Hyperdriver, create a Hyperdriver token with 2 Steam counters. There's no room on that for Go Again, and it doesn't have boost. So, although this is not a max card, it is definitely a max card, similar to Fire That Burns Within, because no other mechanologist can crank a Hyperdriver. So, the idea being that you play Speed Demon, you get that Hyperdriver, and you crank it for an action point, and then that covers Speed Demon, right? A little bit sad that it doesn't have Go Again, or it doesn't have boost, and you get a 1 action point profit, because that's, something that Max definitely needs a little bit more access to, more action point generation. They do have the cog stuff, but I don't think you're necessarily splashing the cog stuff into Max. So, yeah, it is a nice card for Max, and I very much hope it has at least 3 power and becomes a 0-4, again, if you control that Hyperdriver. But I do still wish it had, just the ability to get 1 extra action point, be it through boost, or just native Go Again on Speed Demon itself. Even if it was, if you control a Hyperdriver, this gets +1 and Go Again, or something like that. Or you control 2 Hyperdrivers, it gets Go Again, right? Just a little bit more oomph to it for, a somewhat underpowered hero as it stands. But yeah, definitely a nice card nonetheless for his toolkit. Now, onto the cards from the card vault, starting off with a string of elemental stuff. So, Stormwind Sheath, a 1-cost elemental defense reaction that only comes in red, right? So it is a common, but it only comes in red because there are a few different elemental defense reactions, 1 for each elemental type. So, if a lightning card was pitched to play this, courtesy of Lightning Bond, you get to create an embodiment of lightning token, with embodiment of lightning being when you play an attack action card, destroy this, and the attack gets Go Again. So it is definitely nice to be able to block a sizable amount, and then be able to set up that Go Again proc for your following turn. Though the curiosity here is how much the cost will be worth, right? Especially in, lightning as a bit more of an aggro-focused deck. Is it worth giving that extra card, maybe floating a resource or 2 to feed into something else, if you even have access to something else? So, yeah, it is definitely nice, right? With all the premium defense reactions gutted from generic, it is definitely nice to see some returned, as ultimately they are kind of the best way to try and slow down Silver Age, right? So it doesn't end up morphing back into Blitz. Now, along with Stormwind Sheath, we have Leaven Sheath as the Earth Bond variant. So, again, 1-cost red for an elemental defense reaction with 5 block. Earth Bond, if an Earth card was pitched to play this, you get to create an embodiment of Earth token. Now, this definitely screams synergy for Earth heroes wanting to play this, right? I'm looking at Terra. So, the ability to get 5 block out of this, some resources to stick on, another defense reaction or some other fatigue card you might want to play. I mean, off of a blue, you got Leaven Sheath and, Oasis, right? So, yeah, that's definitely a good combination. But then you also have access to that embodiment of Earth token if you do pitch another Earth card. So, yeah, the ability to, block with a 3, then a 5, and maybe get that +1 to make it a 9, right? Could be really nice. Or even just, again, with embodiment of Earth, having it add that little bit extra block to whatever other cards you might throw out for the turn is definitely going to be a really nice fatigue card for Terra. And then lastly, for Frost, we have Frosthaven Sheath, Ice Bond, if an ice card was pitched to play this, you get to create a Frostbite token under the attacking hero's control. Now this, to me, is definitely a bit more hit or miss because it puts a lot of dependency on what your opponent is doing, right? If they're a big class, then does this really impede what they're doing? Since they'll be able to play, for instance, attack reactions first, and Frostbite may not trigger. It might just be cleared once they end their turn. But against, an aggro class, that 5 block value could definitely be solid enough, and then that 1 extra resource cost onto whatever they're trying to follow up with could definitely impede what they're trying to do. Now, as a rare, we have Colors of Aria, and again, this is just a singular color card, right? It doesn't come in yellow and doesn't come in blue, and rightfully so, because while this is face up in any zone, it's Earth, Ice, and Lightning, right? Meaning it is the perfect card to pitch into those bond cards. It will trigger any of them. And then going beyond that, you also have its ability to work with all of the channel cards, right? Now, it gets a little bit awkward because it is a red, but still, the ability to have this card hit all 3 elemental types is definitely pretty nice. Now, when it comes to Fuse or, say, Bravo's ability, from my understanding, it doesn't work, right? So the idea there is you get to reveal a elemental card, be it Earth, Ice, or Lightning. I should stop saying elemental because it's elemental, and then it's, Ice, Earth, Lightning, right? But take Bravo as the example, right? You get to reveal an Earth, an Ice, and a Lightning card from your hand. Because this card is only triggered once it is face up in a zone, and your hand is a zone, and I'd assume, to some extent, revealing is putting the card face up, but it doesn't have the card typing until it is face up, so you can't actually select it, right, as a Earth, Ice, or Lightning card while it is in your hand unrevealed, if that sort of makes sense. Granted, the ruling may just be that revealing a card from your hand is not the same as putting it face up in a zone, right? So for now, my understanding, Tick works with Bond and Tick works with Channel, but may not be your autocomplete card for the plethora of Fuse that we do have, because that to me is definitely pretty scary, right? A 1-card fix for all the dual Fuse cards, or even for some of the heroes, the ability to use this as a elemental card they don't actually have access to. That would be utterly scary. But in saying that, right, going back to the Bond cards, this does mean that, for instance, as an elemental ice hero, you can take a card with Lightning Bond, and if you get it along with Colors of Aria, you can still proc that embodiment of lightning, which is definitely a very interesting interaction to have access to, regardless of the Fuse mechanic, right? So yeah, definitely a highly complex, highly interesting card that will definitely be a curiosity to see what exactly it opens up. Now, to go along with it, we have Elemental Strike. As additional cost to play this, banish a card from hand. If it's Earth, this gets +2. Lightning, this gets go again. And Ice, this gets dominate. So again, rationalizing it with Colors of Aria, you banish the card first, putting it face up. Colors of Aria then gets the typing of Earth, Ice, and Lightning, and therefore satisfies the checks of Elemental Strike. So, this card is definitely pretty disgusting. It is a Majestic, so you don't have to worry about it for Sage, but it being a potential 0-cost 7 with Go Again is scary. Not to mention then if it has that Dominate tacked on top of it. So it is still a 2-card play, Elemental Strike and the card you're bashing, so it's definitely comparable to Inline Strike, but yeah, 7 with Go Again, ooh, Earth Lightning is definitely eating good. You, of course, still have access to the different pulse cards as well that do serve dual elemental roles, along with a couple cards here or there, right? For instance, for, say, Jarl. So, yeah, it being a 7 Dominate is still pretty nice as well. Now, on to equipment, starting off with Savage Claw. Action, pay 2, tap and attack. If a card with 6 or more power was pitched to attack with this, this gets +1. So, for me, this just is great, right? I've been playing a lot of Ball Breaker KO, and this just fixes the few awkward turns that I do happen to run into where I haven't actually hit the discard for Ball Breaker because I'm playing, Buck Wild or Flex Speed. So to have this as a weapon that will more consistently be a 4-power swing is definitely really nice. I do kind of wish that its trigger check was similar to Buckwild, where it's just if you have a card with 6 or more power in your pitch zone, but there's only a few awkward situations where you shouldn't be able to pitch a 6 power card into this because it should be the last thing that you're doing on your turn. So Savage Claw definitely looks pretty nice. Makes me curious if we might get Mandible Claw 2.0 and be something a little bit similar because, again, the rationale here is if you float resources, you can't actually utilize its ability. So, for instance, if it was a Mandible Claw version where if a card with 6 or more power was pitched to this, it gets Go Again, it does mean you do have to be a lot more aware of the resources you're floating because you might not be able to trigger its proc, right? So, yeah, I do think it would be a little bit harder to achieve than Mandible Claw itself, with discard just being rampant in Brute. But at the very least, just the power version is good by me, right? This is definitely just completely taking over Ball Breaker in my latest KO deck. Because again, it just allows you to dive into more of those non-discard cards for Brute that they're getting more and more of, right? So again, Buck Wild and Flex Speed are really nice cards for KO that in conjunction with Savage Claw just have a more consistent amount of damage, right? So, Synapse Spark Cap, right? A new base headpiece action, tap, banish an Evo from your hand, and you get to create a Ponder token. So this is definitely a Klloo card, right? Being able to banish an Evo from your hand and get that Ponder, so have an Evo set up for his ability, along with being able to Arsenal card, definitely helps speed him up a little bit, give him a bit more options to still be able to, attack, and then go through his setup stages of trying to equip himself. Not to mention, it has Battle Worn, so that is just fantastic, right? It's definitely, for me, the new best base headpiece, right? Outclassing the adaptive stuff. In terms of Battle Worn, you still have Adaptive Dissolver for Arcane Barrier. But to compare it to the current base heads that do still exist, Breakout and Protoss, right, need to run Hyperdrivers, so, this is just strictly better because you're not as at risk of destroying it since it is Battle Worn. And then the effect on Cogwork's base head, I think the starting block is definitely a lot more valuable than the actual effect of pay 1, remove a steam counter, and shuffle a Mechnologist attack action card from your banish zone into your deck. Not to mention that itself is being, restricted around boosting. So yeah, the ability to consistently every turn stick an Evo in your banish zone as Klloo is definitely nice, and then forward that card to, maybe an Arsenal card, maybe a card you play on your next turn, right, is definitely good enough. Next up, Grimoire of Felling Song. And the curiosity about this card is it is a Runeblade offhand equipment piece that is majestic, while we currently have Scepter of Pain banned. So yeah, Runeblade does not have access to any other one-handed weapon, so I would assume we're going to get one, right? Or at the very least, Scepter of Pain is going to get unbanned. So instant, pay 1, destroy this, and you get to create a Rune Chant token, which can definitely help. In terms of Rune Gate or any sort of situation where Rune Chant pays for a cost, unless you're playing multiple cards, you're sort of just upfronting the cost anyway, but being able to go a little bit wide in, say, Vinset, have this generate that Rune Chant token at instant as well, can definitely be pretty nice. And then for Guardian, we have Magmatic Carapace. Whenever you play an aura, you may tap this and pay 1 resource. If you do, you get to create a Seismic Surge token, and it has Guardwell 2 as a Silver Age piece of equipment. So everything we go through from now is rare, right? So it is Silver Age applicable. This is definitely a really nice chess piece, to me, comparable to Tectonic Plating, especially in Velda, just because of the ability to tempo push with it, right? So Tectonic Plating is a once per turn action, meaning you always have to use it on your turn, and it's most likely something you're doing before you're going into anything else. But, Guardian got access to a whole bunch of instant auras, and it's any aura to trigger Magmatic Carapace. So essentially what you can do is you can play it on your turn, untaps at the end of your turn, and then if you have another instant aura, you can use it again on your opponent's turn, right? It will tap, and it won't untap till the end of your next turn. But you can get that 2-turn push, where you get Seismic Surge on your turn, Seismic Surge on your opponent's turn, which makes Velda a lot more applicable, especially in Silver Age, where you only really have to find one Seismic Surge, and Magmatic Carapace could handle the rest. So yeah, definitely seems like a really solid card that also blocks for 2, right? So its applications will be very interesting to see, and how exactly you get the most out of it, right? Pitching 1 into it, most likely having 2 floating because you're Guardian, and then going into something else defensively, or, offensively on your turn. So, yeah, definitely nice, but also somewhat balanced because you do have to find that aura card. Now, for Ranger, Bolton Boots. So, remember, Snapdragon Scalers are gone in Silver Age, so these are definitely sorely needed, since Ranger doesn't really have access to any real good go-again boots, aside from, say, quick clicks if you are taking Nimblism. So attack reaction, pay 1, destroy this target arrow attack with greater than its base power, gets go again, and Battle Worn 1. So a little bit of block, and then a nice go again proc. Does cost you 1, and it has to be used on a pumped arrow, but yeah, can definitely be pretty nice. I think the cost of it is definitely a little bit more applicable, right? And it should work across the board in all your different ranges. Whereas something, like Perch Grapplers, you really want to be aggressive, you want to be getting that extra value out of it, playing maybe 3 arrows, let alone then if we go back to the Sarong, wanting blue arrows. So Bow and Shots definitely fills a much needed void for Ranger in Silver Age, and it's always nice to have a reactive bit of equipment, right? Where your opponent has to plan around it, right? Because it's applicable at this point, and you may or may not use it depending on what you have left. Now, Trench of Watery Depth for Pirate. When this defends, you may pitch a blue card from your graveyard, and you gain the resources. So, this is a interesting card. So the idea being you get 3 resources when you defend. The problem currently that I am facing when I look through all the cards is Pirate doesn't really have access to a whole lot that they want to play on your opponent's turn. So yeah, very curious to see what else comes along with this to make it workable. But yeah, just being able to block and get 3 resources seems disgusting, right? So for now, Unmovable, Oasis Respite, the generic defensive stuff comes to mind. But yeah, I'm sure there's something specifically for Pirate in the works to really kick this up a notch. But defend, gain 3 resources, that's pretty crazy. Not to mention you are pitching the card, so it is going back into your deck, right? So definitely useful for a whole bunch of reasons. Now, comeback kicks. So again, should be for Sage, but I'm gonna say this is aggro tough nut stuff, right? So whenever the crowd cheers you, if you have less life than each other hero, you may destroy this, and if you do, gain 1 action point. So think of it as consistent action point, similar to, Bean Trackers with draw and discard, but Tough Nut style, since he can, use his ability to hopefully get a crowd cheers proc, and then all you have to meet is that less life condition, which again is pretty much what you want to be on as, a revered hero. So it does have Battle all in 1, so it's definitely nice. And then again, just having access to that action point to do a whole bunch of different things definitely seems pretty cool, right? So you can send a few more applicable big attacks, followed by a rock using comeback kicks as Tough Nut without having to, rely on the random roll of Scab Skin. So maybe we get to the point when maybe Tough Nut aggro becomes a nice rock swinging thing. But other than that, just in general for Revered, having access to an action point is pretty crazy. Having access to a free but conditional action point, even crazier. So you've got cards like Cheers where, you can set this up on the previous turn, you then get it on the following turn. As long as you meet that life condition again, you've got a full hand potentially, and that extra action point to string a whole bunch of big stuff together. Not to mention the attacks themselves that Revered has access to with a crowd cheer prop like Comeback Kid that, again, just let you go 2 tool cards wide, right? And as Guardian, that can be pretty disgusting. Imagine 2 crush effects coming at you. One, a little bit buffed from some auras, probably as Pleiades. You block it out, you're happy, and then all of a sudden you've got another one to deal with. So yeah, damage is getting through. It's whether or not any of those effects stick. So, and the whole action points for Guardian is definitely a curious thought. And then lastly, we have Unyielding Grip, which I'm going to throw out again as a Tough Nut card, even though it is generic. So if you have no cards in your hand, this gets +3 block, and it has Blade Break starting off with 0 block. So the idea being, if you're given your whole hand, this is just a nice set of premium block on some arms. But, what hero really wants to give their whole hand other than Tough Nut? Because Tough Nut can still use the ability and still swing with a decent weapon. So yeah, in Silver Age, equipped with these unyielding grips, you got a nice chunk of extra life potentially as Tough Nut, and then still be able to send something like Bone Basher as a nice 4 2-cost swing. Again, you should be hitting, right, through Tough Nut's ability. So yeah, Unyielding Grip, definitely a curious card. I'm curious to see if there's anything else in the works, some other cards to synergize with no cards in hand, right? Something you can obviously Arsenal and play, but nonetheless, just being 3 block in the arm slot. I mean, if you're already losing, you're already giving your hand, this could definitely help give you a little bit of leeway, not to mention in some scenarios where, one other cheeky brute might be a little bit dominant, as he was in Blitz, where you got no hand anyway, you can use Unyielding Grip and then get your cards back at the end of the turn. But that's all the cards for now, right? So we'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think. What cards are you excited for? Are you digging the elemental theme, right? Because so far, what was it? Like half of this was just elemental cards. Though again, if you saw the art throughout the trailer, there's plenty of Shadow and Light stuff as well. So it's hard to say what set this is or replaced, if it is Monarch 3 or a Tails-esque set that was kind of slated around mid-year, right, with the return of Aurora. But nonetheless, it is definitely shaping up to be a pretty interesting set. Let me know what you think. See ya.